Fishing to me is the last of the hunters. I stand aboard here and I get, I ought to go back.
Saying no to wind energy it's not an option, because ultimately, certainly in the UK, the chances are it will happen, so it's going to get built. We were given a chart showing the grounds that these wind farms were going to use and had been leased, and we had had no engagement up to that point.
If you take a dartboard, and the bullseye is the most important bit, they built the wind farm in the bullseye. One of the developers turned up one day with these agents, and we went for a cup of tea and we sat around the table. There's 3 or 4 fishermen, including myself, and they laid a chart on the table and said, we're going to build a wind farm here. Much to our surprise, because we didn't know what was coming, and they said, but we're not worried about the fishermen because it's divide and conquer. Fishermen can't stick together.
When we found out where Thanet was going to be constructed and the piece of ground that had been leased, the fishermen were pretty devastated, because it was on an area at that time that was particularly good for cod fishing. But we already realised at that point we'd kind of missed the boat. This process had already begun, and we just weren't part of it.
It is key that industry is represented by a few people that has been nominated by the many. Having meetings with multiple fishermen and multiple developers, in our experience, tends to end up in a rammy.
Yeah, I serve as a fisheries liaison for the fishermen, and the idea is that the voice of the fishermen is kind of heard, so I take their concerns, discuss them with the developers. This is standard now. A developer pays an FLO, and the FLO doesn't start when construction starts. It starts as early as it absolutely possibly can. So I'm now more involved in the surveys, things like local knowledge on the tides, local knowledge of which fishermen are likely to be where for surveys, long before the surveys happen, even to do with how the fishermen use the ground prior to necessarily all of the engineering solutions coming forward. There's a lot of education from both sides about who's doing what. So the developers should fund the FLO, which is standard in the UK. The developer funds the FLO, and the FLO is there to represent, he's there for the fishermen, so that their voice is at those meetings.
When you put this amount of turbines in, you alter the flow of the tide, the direction of the tide. That's a big thing for us, sediment. And those sediment plumes are obviously a lot more obvious to the eye when looking from above. So we think that the dynamics of the Thanet offshore wind farm have changed these world famous sandbanks to a different feature to what we've known them in the past. You get a lot more of sediment mixing up, especially on the big tides. Very poor visibility, the fish swim very slow, they sense the gear, and you don't catch them. You want clearer water where they're chasing smaller fish, bang, you get them. This particular boat will not for now fish in the Thanet offshore wind farm. That was for us one of our best pieces of fishing ground. It was lost for several different reasons, because I think a lot of the species like cod and that decided that they didn't want to be in and around the area because the high frequency vibration and noise.
Because it's happening so fast and there's no real research, so we don't know the effects on fishing, we don't know the effects on the ocean. So in the end there will be so much wind farms in the sea. What happens? We don't know.
As yet we don't really know what impact the construction activity is going to have on the scallops. We can reliably guess that it's not going to be good because the ground's going to be disturbed, the water column's going to be disturbed, so the entire life cycle of scallops is going to be disturbed for a couple of years.
You know, the fact that there's mussels and there's oysters, that stuff only used to be on the odd buoy chain.
Yeah.
Now they're on 100 structures out here, or with all the others, hundreds of structures. When there's too many, they fall off, which goes underground, then you get starfish, which feed on them, and it's a vicious circle.
It's also lost because there's not really enough room to work between the turbines safely. When you're hauling, you could easily set down onto a turbine. And that's what's happened there with that collision. It's not a steaming accident, that is literally setting down onto a turbine.
Because here, if they had it northeast, southwest, people could drift probably straight down in between them.
Yeah,
because it goes northwest, southeast,
It's crap. You're always across
you know, there's always a turbine in the way. If it's dark, you still got to concentrate, because after 4 or 5 years they let the lights go out on them, whereas at the moment everyone's individually lit. Here they've let all the lights go out on a lot of them.
Too many cables that are in the water column. There's too many anchor spread. The anchor spread go out to 1,000 metres, and it'd be far too dangerous for any vessel to go into that area.
We have a profitable fishery right now,
Yeah.
and we want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
And we're afraid with the wind farms, with loss of ground, that we'll be constrained to a smaller area.
Yeah, and talking and listening to the fishermen, because that doesn't happen right now. They do talk to us, but they never listen. Even if we ask them to move a mile to the north, they say no, because they already have the consent, and the government just wants the wind farms because that's their #1 priority.
But we did suffer very badly at the beginning by not only not being part of it, but really not understanding it. We've learned an awful lot in 10 years. We're still learning.